Brings me great pleasure to introduce to you the head of state of the nation of Hawaii, Bumpy Kanahele. Hi,
Hey,
Bumpy.
aloha, brother.
Welcome to the show. So
Yeah,
grateful
thank
for
you.
you to come in.
Thank
so,
you.
let's start off with how did you arrive at the head of state
For the nation of Hawaii. Back in 1993, it was a special year. It was the 100-year anniversary or commemoration of the overthrow of Queen Liliuokalani, which was a big thing. There were celebrations throughout the year and a lot of education about our past, our history, and things that happened 100 years ago. As time came along, in the month of November and December was really important because then the United States government had a bill that was going through Congress and it became law. And that law was an apology to Native Hawaiians for the illegal overthrow. In terms of law, it put the state in a very peculiar situation.
A nation state being recognized, yeah?
Yeah, or the restoration in our case of a nation state, a kingdom, a country. Now, mind you that at that time there was not enough information or not much information on Hawaiian kingdom law. A lot of the laws, the penal codes, civil codes, which we see today, and treaties and documentation were not as readily available at the time. However, I sat on the Sovereignty Advisory Commission. I was appointed by Governor Waihee at that time to a 21-member commission. It was called the Sovereignty Advisory Commission. And the job of this Sovereignty Advisory Commission, it started in July 1st. And the commission got together and had to explore all the different areas of sovereignty. My job was to look in the international arena. I was the chairperson of that particular committee. And so I had the opportunity of bringing in an international lawyer. His name is Francis Anthony Boyle. He's an international law professor teaching now currently at the University of Illinois. And he came in paid for by the state to give his opinion on this law that just passed in November. Congress passed it, both the House and Senate, and then November 23rd, President Clinton signed it into effect. In essence, what happened was it put everything, all title to land, natural resources, cloudy. Everything went cloudy because what that did is just reverse a lot of the things by law that is in question now. This is where the renaissance of the Hawaiian movement starts. After that law passes, a lot of people start their own kingdoms and countries. In our case, the lawyer, eventually Francis Boyle, became my legal advisor for the nation of Hawaii. He gave us a roadmap to follow. We recognized the elders, the kupuna councils of all Hawaii. We had a big conference in Maui. It was over 300 kupuna that attended from different islands, the heads of families, the heads of communities, and got together and created the nation of Hawaii. It wasn't overnight, of course it took a few years, but in 1995 the Hawaii Constitution was created. The strength actually was the elders in Maui of this whole thing. It was really strong. And at that time, in 1995, it was so new to everybody, we scared the hell out of the law enforcement, multinational corporations, everybody's going crazy. And because of the push in believing that all we had to do was proclaim and then act as a country, actually do stuff as a country. A lot of people know we do have a land base. That land base came out of believing in the apology law, the power of the apology law, and we went back and started to restore the land physically. I was appointed by our kupunas in Hawaii. There was over 300 kupunas. They signed the Constitution and put me in charge of pursuing further sovereignty, further independence for people. But at that point, the movement was also being overshadowed by, the boogeyman. Right. And so I got picked up in August of 1995 on trumped-up charges and got put away in federal holding, not jail, for about 3.5 months without bail. In the meantime, it was a big thing at that time in my life. It pretty much stalled a lot of everything that was moving forward on the movement.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, it stopped it. But then when they stopped me, what was going on educated a lot of people. And then from there, a lot of kingdoms, a lot of countries, a lot of kings and queens, and everybody was starting to claim their peace and their place in Hawaii, right? And so this happened a long time ago. While I was incarcerated, there was a big push to help me get out and all this stuff. And what it did though, it became more of a, I went in I was about 320 pounds. I came out, I was about 265 pounds. To kill the monotony when you're incarcerated and you lose some kind of freedom in that way, you have to really think about where you're at and what you're going to do, how you're going to survive. One of the things was people would ask me, like when the news came in, what do you feel like, in the back and waiting? And I told them, well, it's a good weight loss program, right? But it's the constructive things you got to do to survive. It was really controversial. I was on a federal lake ban for like about 2.5 years. They did not allow me to go back to my village in Waimanalo, let alone I live in Waimanalo, and I couldn't go back to Waimanalo and go to any beaches, any stores, any true story. I was still left with this responsibility to seek independence and move our country forward. And as time went along, you get much wiser and you get the kind of experience that not too much people have. We're the only land-based organization in Hawaii, meaning that we fought for the things that we believed in, and one of them was our freedom, freedom to independence. And along the way, I also learned that it's not going to happen overnight either. Bringing it up to this point now, I was invited to come to Earth Day.
Yeah.
And it just amazed me. The message for me was, so what is this SHAKA movement all about? I really didn't know. I seen some activists support anti-GMO and all that, and not really understanding until I actually went to Earth Day. And I support this effort. I support the SHAKA movement. I want everybody to know that in our culture and our tradition, there's no room for any kind of makeup of anything that it don't belong to nature. And to us, Hawaiians, if you look at the congressional record and the discussion about Hawaii, specifically in regards to Native Hawaiians, Harlan Cleveland, the president of UH, he was the ex-president of University of Hawaii, and he says this thing about Hawaii's immigration and intermarriage bringing the most intriguing experiment that the world has ever seen in a multicultural society. And I'm like looking at this, I go, wait a minute. A multicultural society experiment sounds like GMO to me. You got a pure Hawaiian, and then over 100 years, that Hawaiian genealogy may have Japanese, Chinese, Filipino, Haole, Popolo, Black. So Hawaiians has been under not just colonization and subjugation and suppression, but talk about GMO. That's the ultimate GMO, a human GMO. That stuff not good. If there's no proof either way, we shouldn't even do anything. Don't advance it. That should be stopped, a moratorium. It should be in favor of more research, more study, more community involvement. There's a lot of people out there concerned.
Just like much of the information that you couldn't find in the 90s about the
exactly,
nation, and about all the laws and all the things that have happened, all the truth about what genetic engineering is has also been hidden. But there's a lot of researchers now in the same way that are coming up and finding. And what they're going to tell you on TV, because the company here just bought $1 million worth of advertising to be played in October. So they're ramping up. They're going to tell you we're feeding the world, right? And that the jobs are very important. But they're going to try and tell you that everything's safe. I mean, people are eating this food and it's all fine and what have you. But what they're not telling you is what's happening right here. What's happening on the Aina? What's happening on the surface, 2 feet down? What's happening to the water, the reefs? What's happening to the dust that we're all having to breathe? All of these things. That's what we want to know. And just like you wanted to know, what happened to our rights? Where did that fence go up? How did all of a sudden now someone owns this land? It just all these things just kind of happened, and then you just kind of you have to try and really get to the bottom and get to the truth of it. And so it is a sovereignty movement of your body, of your health, because it's the sovereignty of one's life, for all life. And for all the critters, their sovereignty. They don't need to be exposed. All the microbes, all the animals, all the bees, all the butterflies, every plant. It's for their safety and their sovereignty to be as God created them.
Yeah.
And that's one of the sayings that somebody came up with, let God play God and get it out of the hands of man. you know?
Yeah, and we're capable of all that stuff. You know, technologies today can help do better stuff than they're using to make it worse.
Yeah.
You know, but this dialogue between the SHAKA movement and the Native Hawaiian people has got to expand, and we got to educate each other more and more. And basically, it's like watching each other's back, right, out there.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we from the land, we intrinsic into the land, we're, you know, everything about it, you folks taking care of the land, and all the stuff that you worried about what they put into it as well. Well, of course, we feel the same way.
Yeah.
The damage done to Native Hawaiians because of the history is so bad that we think we did something wrong. You know,
It's your fault.
Yeah, it's our fault, right? And so I'm like, wait a minute, you know, because why is because we have no control over what's going on with things. We have a royal commission that has been taking signatures of Native Hawaiians,
that's right, yeah.
not non-Hawaiians, but Native Hawaiians, which in the last 4 weeks, we went over 10,000 signatures. In the last 2 years, we've accumulated over 130,000 signatures, all Native Hawaiian. And it's a private, separate election to ward away from any kind of discrimination efforts that's been taking place for the last how many years since the Rice Cayetano case, which basically, you know, opened up the ceded lands to be sold, or, you know, done in ways that, again, it's another problem that's leading to all these multinational corporations and a lot of the media people. The first thing gonna come in is the media, because when we had to go and support the desecration of bones because multinational corporations coming in and nailing the burials, we had to come in and wait a minute. But the first thing comes in is all the media guys, and hey, you know, we would like to open communications with liaison with the Hawaiian community. Oh, okay. Oh, we have funding for programs and stuff like that, but that's how they work. And what you described to me in our discussion about how they operate, rightly so. So if you see stuff, you see a lot of these corporations getting fined recently or lately, I mean, you know, real huge fines, I think like $4,000, $3,000.
Then they're making hundreds of millions, right?
Yeah, so we got to pay attention to those things. Those are things that pacify what people complain about, just enough so it can still hang in there and exist. And with a new Hawaiian government, and getting back to the 130,000 votes, they will convene a constitutional convention this year. And what comes out of the convention will be an organic document that will decide what the Hawaiian people will do. And it's a big mess, right? I really see how, or we're trying to talk about how the SHAKA movement can combine with the emerging Hawaiian government that's coming up. Because it will be a matter of jurisdiction. You got city, state, federal jurisdiction. And although we're talking about a lot of this stuff, I'm already saying we got to create our own jurisdiction. The Hawaiian government has to have their own jurisdiction so that the lands that we do have and the oceans that we do have jurisdiction over can finally go about it without politics involved, without all the bad stuff, you know, and let the good stuff prevail. Because in every level, you get cleaning the Aina, but you get stuff that can bring us energy and power and communications in a whole different manner. Those things cannot go to its fullest extent, even in the medical field with alternative medicine, is because of the jurisdiction. It's impossible to get anything going. You know, I just seen that, you know, Hawaii, I think, is number 2 in the United States, the highest cost. That's crazy. With this overthrow, with the damage over 100 years ago, that's what you're dealing with as well. So government ain't thinking straight. They got problems on problems on problems, right? So I'm looking at ways not to only bridge the differences we have amongst each other, the Hawaiian people, but also things and differences, or maybe a common interest with groups that we can work on that level. And that's how you build a society you want, right?
Yes.
Well, I want to do that, you know. So.
Yeah, well, SHAKA currently stands for Sustainable Hawaiian Agriculture for the Keiki and the Aina, right? We're doing this for the children. And once this particular initiative is over, the name may shift to Sustainable Hawaiian Actions for the Keiki and the Aina. I mean, because people are coming to us with all different types of technologies.
Yeah, unreal. Yeah, you see that. Yeah.
You know, that fragile kind of connection. You know, I've spent some time with Sam Kahai, you know, and various other kahuna. And each has said that they have felt there comes a time when, like, enough already, and we make that shift.
Yeah.
And people feel that in their heart, and we are that. And yet how we do that, it's an improv, you know? A story when I was 5 years old, watching the cartoons as a kid, and there was this one little PSA for the environment, and there's this picture of a Native American sitting on a bluff looking over the highway, and he's sitting on his horse, and there's this tear coming down his eye, and they say, people start pollution, people can stop it. And I don't know why, but in that moment, there was a switch in my heart. The one thing, I mean, if there was ever a time, at least as far as if we're going to work within the structure of the government that has claimed authority over this land, I mean, it says claim, that's all it is, that they've claimed it, and they've taught everybody that it was true. Well, we're finding out the real truth.
Right.
Yet if there was one time we participated in the system, if there was ever one vote, I don't care if you vote for who the mayor is or who the governor is or who the whoever is, to vote on this moratorium, to come in and say, yes, it is very smart to stop everything and protect the land until we know it's safe. If that's the only vote you ever did in your entire life, please help us, because this time it matters. If we miss it this time, the window closes. And so we need everyone's signature on petitions. Go to the website, shakamovement.org. You'll see right there in the very top all the places you can go. Please vote for the moratorium, for your right to protect yourself, protect your family, to protect this land, and ultimately stand in the truth of your sovereign existence as a human life form.
You know, the interesting thing is, it's not a year from now what we're going through. This excites me because most of the people probably, except for the incarcerated Hawaiians who are participating in the elections for this Hawaiian government, the rest would probably be about 100,000 would probably be registered voters. So we've never had them in one place. So these guys going to the poll, and you get in there, only you know what you want to vote on. And that's the time to do it. You know, when you go in there, vote on the moratorium and support this effort. And it's kind of like, for me, with the sovereignty movement and the new emerging Hawaiian government, it's kind of like the same thing. Stop selling land and stop doing all this building and all these unnecessary things until Native Hawaiians form their new Hawaiian government. Because if you continue these actions and being notified like this, live, then you'll be no different than the guys what they did 100 years ago. We do have, it runs side by side. The moratorium helps us preserve anything that we might jump into that might be harmful to us. And a moratorium for me, and we've talked about that on land and stuff, would be because how can you support and create an act that gives us an opportunity to build this Hawaiian government with restrictions? So just the fact that the prisoners, incarcerated Hawaiians can vote in this election tells me it's ours. It's the Hawaiian people's, because you can't vote in America. If let alone you're a prisoner, convicted felon is one thing, but you're in jail. I understand the moratorium and the concern about the future of our families, our children, and all that. And that's fine, and I support it. Everybody out there, support these efforts. It's not all the answers in the world, but that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the real answers.
Bumpy, so grateful to have you here. Thank you so much, my brother.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it, and thank you for taking this first step.
Right on. No, thank you too.
I
appreciate it.
Alrighty.
Aloha.